Here's a quick look at what we'll be doing today. So welcome people, introductions of who'll be speaking. We'll then hear from SCDC about the co-creation approach, who's been involved, some of the key themes that have come out and what people have been saying from the co-creation process. We'll then be hearing from Juliet Swan from Transparency International and chair of the Civil Society Open Government in Scotland Committee. And as well as Doreen Grove, Head of Open Government for Scottish Government, to look at the vision for the fourth action plan. Next, we'll then be looking at a discussion where we'll go into breakout rooms and be able to think about how do we capture and keep up that momentum from the Open Government co-creation process. And then we'll be hearing some closing remarks and what we can do next after this call, what's coming next. In terms of the purpose of this session, we really want to be able to reflect on how we co-created Scotland's Open Government Action Plan and how we're still in that process. We want to share that vision for the next plan and also then generate some discussion and ideas of how we keep that momentum going. And keep that enthusiasm and excitement of the process into delivery of the action plan. So I'm going to hand over to Doreen Grove, Head of Open Government, to give us a brief overview of what open government means and what it is, what we're talking about today.
Thanks very much, Finlay, and really welcome. It's a lovely to see so many new people actually coming into the space of open government. And I hope that's because you recognise these are the things we need to do collectively. To think about how we properly have a governance structure that works for us all, and to do that a little bit collaboratively. Because there are so many people on the sign-in list that we don't think have been terribly involved in open government before. We thought we'd just start with literally a few minutes on where open government comes from and the kind of purpose for it. Open Government Partnership is an international organisation. It has 70 countries and 150 OGP locals. And we are classed as an OGP local. Imagine getting that past the First Minister. But it is a process that President Obama came up with, along with 8 heads of state and 8 CEOs of big international NGOs. And the purpose was to recognise the drop in trust after the financial crash in 2008-9. Obama in his White House got his White House staff to look at the kinds of areas where trust in government was being thought about and looked at. And in 2010-11, they developed a proposal, brought together, as I say, these heads of state to think about what it could do. So it isn't something that is applied by government. It is something that is at every level of open government. It is a shared endeavour between government and civil society. The aim is very much about having processes and ways of working in government that allow you to be able to see, get involved in and hold government to account, but through really thinking about what openness and transparency means, what participation properly means, and accountability means. So all of those sort of principles are run right through what we do. We've been a member in our own right since 2016-17. We're busily co-creating our fourth action plan. The idea that comes from Open Government internationally is that this isn't some random bunch of things. It's looking for concrete commitments that will help transform how we work together and how we do government. It's kind of the how rather than the what, but we very much look for examples of how you can apply this and do so in ways that works for the whole population and not just one segment of it. Being really thoughtful about that. We have had 3 previous action plans, and we talked about those at an event yesterday, but we have an idea to this time to kind of lift what we're doing to make it much more strategic, and Juliet and I will come back to that in a moment, but just to say open government works at all levels of government, and anyone can get involved and be helpful. So really think about what it is in your own work and the places where the principles of open government can help, and how you can get involved with it at a Scotland level. So we're very happy to go through it, but as you're going through the presentations and the conversations, please think of your questions, and we're really keen to have that conversation about how more people can be involved and more people can be able to do that influencing that really matters. I'm going to hand back. Who am I handing back to? I'm handing back to Finlay.
Okay, thank you, Doreen. So I'll be passing over to colleagues at SCDC and to Dawn Brown, so Head of Programme for SCDC, to take us through how they approached the co-creation process and really led that co-creation process of the action plan. So over to you, Dawn.
Perfect. Thanks, Finlay. If you could pop the slides up for us, that would be great. Okay, so the first phase for us that started back in October 2005 was about really listening to what helps people trust the government and what gets in the way. You'll see here the timeline that we've got there, that we started way back in October, which feels like both minutes are a long time and just a blink away. It feels like we've been working in this way for a wee while now. We then went on and held some facilitated discussions that we hosted to actually start to really dig into what makes open government work for people. What was that understanding? How do they see it working in their own work? And that was through those facilitated conversations. We also did some self-facilitated sessions where we created and shared materials to allow people to have those conversations in their own ways. Part of the really important work that we picked up was that really targeted work to look at the equalities group that we were able to support through stipends to make that participation as easy as possible. And also an online survey, just to make sure that we had that breadth and depth of engagement to let people engage in ways that mattered and made it easy for them to participate. Next slide, please, Finlay. So over that process, we had 46 people across the facilitated sessions, a wide range of 43 survey responses, which were some individual participants, local and national groups, and the equalities groups, which involved over 50 people in their conversations. It was really exciting to know that over 75% of those people were new to open government, but really keen to get involved, really wanted to see how we could shape the future going forward together. It was also great to see that participation spanned around half of Scotland's local authority areas, with a really strong representation from our rural, island and highlands areas that actually gave us that good breadth and depth of reach, and also to hear from some of those more marginalised and easier to overlook and sometimes less heard communities through the conversations. Next one, please, Finlay. Thank you. So what we learned through this. The timing and timelines were vital to allow for good engagement. There were tight timelines in the first phase of the conversations, and we felt that that had been a barrier to some of the equalities groups, particularly those who said that they anticipated conversations about trusting government to be more difficult, where it might tap into negative or traumatic experiences for members where they had had poor experience in the past, and also where additional support would require to be put in place. Some of these organisations were able to participate in the phase one conversations, but many did come on to participate through the wider engagement, often on behalf of their members or encouraging their members to take part in the conversations and feeding back to us either through those surveys or through the different routes that we picked up the information from them. We also found that the stipends were useful, but they didn't repair that previous poor experience. Often those groups were carrying trauma and bruises from previous engagements where they'd been misquoted, misrepresented or ignored. And we felt that was why we had to build in really strong, good feedback and look at those opportunities for further and future engagement to allow people to come together, to actively shape, to really influence that in an ongoing co-productive manner. So these aren't one-off conversations. This isn't the only chance that people in groups will have to shape this. It was really looking to build some of those earlier steps and repair relationships to get people ready to stay engaged. We also provided a lot of support for our online delivery. Where we were using online tools, we would provide great support notes, written instructions in advance, where people could actually go and have a look at the tools that we were going to use before they were in those group situations. We allowed them to test out the different tools that we were using. One of those was Sandbox by Padlet, which is basically just online post-it notes for people to use. But it was really important that people had a chance to try that before they were in groups. There was lots of support there, and we were really mindful of the literacy and language challenges. So we let people know that we would be sharing these screens, that we would have colleagues on hand to help record those conversations, and really looking at how we got the widest participation in there as possible. We also gave people phone numbers and ways to contact us in advance so that if online wasn't a comfortable space for them, that they had ways to connect with that conversation. For receiving the information, we also used as wide a range of methods as we could there. So as I said earlier, some people were able to input to the online survey, but we're really flexible around about how we picked up that information. So for one of the equalities group, they actually held their conversation and just recorded it as a voice note during their session, which they were able to send on to us, which we then transcribed, checked back with them that we'd picked it up correctly, and we then entered that material into the responses as well. So we really found that breadth of being able to listen to how people wanted to share the information with us was absolutely vital to allowing that wide participation. Next slide, please, Finlay. So what we heard from all of this, there were some really strong key themes that came out, regardless of whether they were equalities conversations, whether it was individual responses or from our facilitated conversations. It was really clear people felt that trust isn't something that can be demanded or assumed, it is earned over time. Many participants talked about the challenges of feeling really sceptical because their previous engagement experience hadn't led to visible change, or it had been because they felt decisions had already been made before they were involved. Many of the equalities groups especially reminded us that trust isn't starting from a blank slate. Often these past and ongoing discrimination means that some communities experience government through a lens of caution, fear, and that distrust can be baked in. But there was hope. People told us that trust can grow when government is open, respectful, and follows through what it says it will do. That's not always about getting what people ask for, but it's about those grown-up conversations. If something can't be achieved, coming back to people and letting them know why it can't be done, what's happening instead, and how that process works. So it wasn't a belief that engagement meant that communities and people got everything they wanted, but it was about that really grown-up approach to it. People asked for clear and simple, understandable communication. But that had to be regular, that had to be ongoing. It wasn't a one-off check-in. It was to have that regular feedback loops built in. It needed to be based on ongoing conversations, ongoing relationships. We were also reminded to avoid using language that we think is straightforward because we're immersed and passionate in our subject. It was about keeping it simple, things that make sense to the general population. Also to be really careful that we don't water things down for fear of being for something to be too sensitive or it being a highly charged and emotive subject. There was a real concern that we sometimes wash down these subjects and we end up with statements that say nothing, where people are passionate, where people care, where people are sharing things that really matter to them. We were also reminded that the timelines that we use really need to allow groups the time to sense make the materials for their own ways and spaces for being, and to actually think about ways to reconfigure them so that the conversation was accessible to their membership and their participant groups. That importance of communicating when things change and when things go wrong was seen as vital as well. People in the conversations all said to us that they understand that things won't always go in a textbook manner, but what they want is that grown-up conversation so that if priorities change or if something changes along that time route, that they actually have a chance to be involved and to understand why things have changed, not to suddenly feel surprised when things come out in a way that they weren't expecting. People always said to us that rather than staying quiet and letting things fizzle away, it was important to get those updates, regular check-ins to be able to understand what's happening and why. One of the biggest and most frequent comments to us through those conversations were that people wanted to be treated like adults, respected, and not treated like children. So really just to recap on what we heard there, people were very willing to engage, even though their trust had been dented by past experience. They wanted to shape something new and better for Scotland going forward. That the scepticism often comes from feeling ignored or unheard, or finding that what they'd said had been somehow misrepresented. So we've been very careful through our process that we go back and we sense check. The equalities groups spoke really powerfully about historic and systemic harms and had some suggestions on how we can actually overcome some of that through the process of open government, by being open, by listening, by being respectful. And also the biggest takeaway for us was that trust grows when people see integrity, honesty, and that respectful relationship, and those actions following through on what people have said and shared. So that's kind of where I'd like to end it today and really pass over to be able to get into the conversations, to hear from the people here today and really look at, how do we make this all work for us going forward together? Thank you for your time and listening. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dawn. That was really interesting to hear your experience of taking us through the co-creation process. I'm going to pass over to Juliet Swan and Doreen Grove to give us this high-level kind of vision for what they see the next Open Government Action Plan looking and feeling like.
Hi, thanks Finlay and thanks Dawn. And hi everyone. So my name's Juliet Swan. As Finlay said, I work at Transparency International UK as the Nations and Regions Programme Manager. So I'm based here in Edinburgh. And I'm also the co-chair of the Open Government Scotland steering group. I think so. Dawn has told you a little bit about how the process worked, and I'm going to tell you why we did it. So firstly, I'll set a little bit of context. So before we even started this co-creation process for what is our fourth action plan, and as Doreen said, the action plans are basically just the sort of the roadmap for how we're going to get through the next period. And in Scotland, we set those periods at 5 years to coincide with the parliamentary terms. So before we started the co-creation process for this fourth action plan, I'm going to explain how we got here. So part of the value of open government is that the work as laid out in the action plan is independently assessed and feedback is provided through an independent reporter. So after our midterm review in around 2024, we began to consider what a more strategic approach to implementing open government in Scotland might look like, rather than the sort of policy-specific commitments that we had in the third action plan, which were things like health and social care, fiscal transparency, public participation, and open data, as well as climate change. Because whilst we were seeing notable successes in individual commitment areas, what we weren't seeing was a seeding across government that we wanted to develop of ways of working that met open government principles. So we thought we would just take things up a level and be a little bit more strategic. To help us develop our thinking around that, we talked to the OECD, who have done a substantial amount of work looking at open government and open government strategies. We also looked at other open government strategies. So Canada, Alberta, and Finland are all taking a much more strategic approach to open government. And we discussed that framing and communicating with our multi-stakeholder forum, which is where all of the government and civil society participants in open government get together once a quarter. These conversations brought us to centre what we call trust and transparency as the core of our strategic approach. So, and then thematic pillars beneath that would be tasked with demonstrating trust and transparency. The idea was that those themes could be more agile in bringing in new priorities as the action plan developed because of that 5-year-long action plan period. And as we all know, the policy environment is both slow moving and needs to respond quickly to external change. So we're hopeful that being more iterative will enable us to sort of take that more agile approach. Our intention is that the themes that we've identified, so anti-corruption and accountability, ethical use of digital technology and open data, and public participation, are clear enough to have a co-created set of objectives, but also flexible enough to allow for new areas of work to be brought into our open government plan over the course of the 5 years. Anywho, so these conversations quickly recognised the need to understand what the public considered to be trustworthy government. Because whilst we knew from survey data that trust in government is declining, and we recognised that we needed to reinforce trust, it was less clear what positive perceptions of trustworthiness were across the public. Obviously, we had a decent idea of the sorts of behaviours and ways of working that model trustworthiness, but the co-creation process offered a chance to see if those ideas were shared by the wider public. We also recognised that this would help us find out how we could effectively communicate with the public to demonstrate transparency and trustworthiness, to understand what words would resonate with them, and how to describe open government ways of working in terms that would be meaningful to the public. And indeed, we have also established a communications and engagement working group, again, with representatives from both government and civil society to focus on that. Essentially, therefore, when we were deciding how to go about the co-creation of the action plan itself, this conversation about trust and what trustworthy government looks like created an accessible entry point to talk to a wider audience, not necessarily familiar with open government, in a way that could resonate more clearly with their daily lives and experiences of government. So that was the first phase of the process that Dawn has just described, finding out what trustworthy government looks like for everyday people. The outputs from that work have grounded a series of subsequent, more detailed delivery conversations with civil society partners, focusing in on the themes, and they've been able to centre their discussions in those values identified as being central to trust and transparency. So we weren't just asking, how can we do anti-corruption work? We were asking, how does anti-corruption work help build trust in government in Scotland? It also meant that we had, and continue to have, as the slides that Dawn shared demonstrate, a much more accessible, familiar, and open way of talking with the wider public about open government without drowning them in the necessary but somewhat overwhelming terminology we use. I often reflect that open government is, as Doreen said, active in over 70 countries and 100 and odd local areas. So having shared language for how we describe what we're doing is important, but it can also be a little bit unfamiliar for some people. But I'm really proud of the approach we've taken, which I think has been open to audiences beyond our usual suspects, but without being unfocused or over-promising, which is a risk with a co-creation process that doesn't have clear objectives on what co-creators are influencing. We've been able to centre that familiar concept of trust, give focus to our conversations by setting a vision, and have developed more accessible language to talk about what open government is and does. So we're keen as we move into the delivering the action plan that we have touch points with some of those who participated in the co-creation process to test if how we are working does meet their vision of trustworthy government, and indeed meets a vision of trustworthy government that we can all share. So how we will work will also be agile in responding to feedback from civil society colleagues who interact with government, as well as local government friends and the wider public. So to close my contribution, I'd like to just restate my appreciation of my open government colleagues, both inside government and in civil society, as well as members of the public who have taken time to contribute to this process, and to you all for coming along to listen to us talk about it today. And also to the amazing team at SCDC who have brought incredible empathy, commitment and enthusiasm to our co-creation journey and have really met every aspiration I hoped for it. That's me.
Thanks, Juliet. That was really clear and helpful. I guess from a government perspective, one of the things we've been very keen to do is really demonstrate that we work in partnership. So Juliet and I spend a lot of time pinging ideas between us, and just really trying to make sure that there are kind of no surprises. But added to all that you've had described, I should also say that within government, we have also been having some of these conversations. So hopefully they aren't going to land unexpectedly on our colleagues either, because it is really important principle of open government that we are able to meet the priorities of the elected representatives. I'm a huge supporter of participative democracy, but representative is there too, and it's absolutely vital that what we do is really going to get traction, because it's meeting the priorities of the current elected officials, wherever you are. But what we are really trying to do and structure the way we're working, as Juliet said, we will have high-level descriptions of what's going to be the important factors around each of our 4 themes. Trust and transparency will be an overarching category. There will be work on anti-corruption, on data, and on participation. In all of these, we will be looking for a bank of ideas for actions that can illustrate them and demonstrate it over the years of this Parliament. And we had expressions of interest from inside government, which went very wide-ranging, from Registers of Scotland to our colleagues in public service reform, to all sorts of areas of government. And our hope is that we will be able to support some of that internal and external working. So we are much more open, much more able to be proactive in the way we are publishing information, and getting that as the how we do government. And for me, the sort of maturity that is demonstrated by trying to lift it from being something that is nice to do around the edge to how government actually works. If we can demonstrate that this is an operating model, if you like, that really supports transformation and change and reform, that works for people. So that's kind of the idea of the shift that we took, and we did so with both Juliet and her counterpart, who is the Minister of Parliamentary Business, and we have a new one just today, or actually we have a return. Mr. Hebben is back as Minister of Parliamentary Business, so presumably he's going to be able to pick up really quickly, because he's has been done that job before. But it is really important that this isn't something that is held by by just one team. The Open Government team operates as the sort of glue that sticks most of that together, but it has to be relevant, and it has to be able to demonstrate the benefits of the way that we're working. And to do that, we're really keen to have other people involved right through the process, and not just here to nip our heels, though, you know, Juliet's pretty good at that as well. It's much more about how we find really positive collaborative ways of working. And for each of the themes, we will have working groups. So if there are areas of this work that you're particularly interested in from your own organisation or your own jurisdiction or whatever it is, please feel free to get in touch with us. We'd really like to build on that routine way of bringing people together and get much better at having good communication. We have a newsletter, which I'm sure Finlay will get you signed up to. Nobody gets into one of our events without signing up, you know. It feels really important that this is a continuing conversation. It isn't something that just happens when we create the plan. We really want people to be involved and help us. This isn't something government can do alone, particularly in areas like fast-moving ideas around what technology can do in areas where we know people are struggling to get involved. We want to be able to help set some guardrails around these things and help people to find their route through to be able to influence effectively. I think I'm going to stop there. I'm very happy to answer any general questions now, if anyone has any. Silent audience. I'm not sure I can cope with that. You're not going to be silent for long, because I think Dawn or Finlay is about to move us into rooms.
Yes, so thank you very much, Juliet and Doreen. It's really interesting to see where you see Open Government, the action plan going, and how it is going to be running, go a bit into the themes. Well, in terms of that conversation and wanting that conversation between government and civil society to be at the core, we want to put that in this session and have a conversation amongst ourselves about how can we keep this sort of spirit of the co-creation process that's been so exciting, really, and quite enthusiastic, alive during delivery. So we'll be going to breakout rooms to discuss this question, where we'll be aided by colleagues from SCDC. So Sam, Laura, Francesca, and Dawn will be helpfully facilitating these discussions. And there's some helpful prompts here as well that I'll put in the chat to get us thinking. So I'll just read through the prompts for this question. So potentially, what have we learned about co-creation so far that we must not lose when we move into delivery? What kind of feedback loops invite that dialogue that we want, and it isn't just people being informed and us going out one way? What information do people need to stay meaningfully involved in that delivery process? How do we balance the pace of delivery with space for collaboration? And finally, how do we maintain shared ownership? Now, these are just to get some ideas going, but we're really thinking about this overarching question. How do we sort of keep that momentum, keep that spirit of co-creation going through to delivery? So I'll pass over to Sam to send us into our breakout rooms, and we'll have about 10 minutes to discuss that with who's on the call.
Thanks, Finlay. Yeah, I'll just open the rooms now, just to say that one group's going to be staying in this main room. So if you don't move, don't worry. That's all according to plan. So I'll just open the rooms now. There we go. I think that should be all of us moved across.
Sam, are you able to copy the information that I put in the question across all groups?
Yes, I should be able to do that. Let me just take a wee screenshot of it and I'll send it.
Thank you.
I don't know if we want to start with some discussion, or I'll just do that.
No bother, Sam, I'll pick that up. Does anyone have any questions initially about what they want to hear, what they heard about? And then I think we've got Finley's questions there. So we're looking at how can we keep the spirit of co-creation alive during delivery? What have we learned about co-creation so far that we need to be careful not to lose? What kind of feedback loops invite dialogue? What do people need to stay meaningfully involved? In the first instance, we only have 10 minutes, I think, in the discussion group. So if we don't get too caught up, if you have any questions that are burning questions that you need to know in order to take part in the discussion, then great. Please feel free to answer any of it, ask any of us. But other than that, if we just move into saying, is there anything that you've learned there about the co-creation process that you think is important for us to hang on to? Ricky, I'll bring you in.
I'll come in. I don't like silence. Yeah, I've been involved in some of these meetings for a while now. I guess just what I've sort of learned through this process a little bit is that, you know, obviously we've all got our own jobs, we're all busy, and sometimes this is just something else to think about. So there's been quite regular emails coming out from, I think, from SCDC and other people. I think that's been quite helpful from my point of views. And sometimes those emails are just like a bit of an update about, you know, this is what's happening and things like that. So that's been really helpful from my point of view, just to keep it in my mind, you know, I'm trying to keep on top of everything else. So I think, yeah, just as a very simple point, just those regular updates that keep coming through. Because I think, yeah, this started, was October last year. I was just checking back my emails, I think, when I was invited to some meetings and things. So it's very easy in amongst everything else to sort of forget some, because one of the things I've been aware of as well, you know, there's a lot going on as well. I've seen some stuff about that whole Democracy Matters report as well. And it's, I sometimes get a bit confused at how they all join together a little bit. You know, it's like because there's so many different things, but they've got similar themes. You know, the whole Democracy Matters about involving communities, etc. The Scottish Government released the Inclusive Toolkit, which was all about making sure people are involved in communication. So yeah, there's a lot of sort of similar things ongoing that, yeah. So maybe that's one other area or one thing we could look at a little bit is like how are these things joined up, or if they are joined up, you know, I think from my point of view, I sometimes try to get my head around, is this linked to that? Is that project, or are they totally separate? So yeah, maybe just give a bit of consideration to a few main things that are happening at the same time and whether there are links between them.
Thanks for that, Ricky. And yes, it's good to hear that you're hearing about a number of different things. And you're right, they do link in and tie into each other. But sometimes it's about getting that message out about how that's all working behind the scenes and how people are talking to each other. So that's, yeah, I've taken a note of that. Thank you. Ro, I'll pull you in if that's okay.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to term this. But I very much agree with what Ricky has said, but from the other side, and that is, I just wonder, I may get the wrong terms here, but are public systems designed so that public officers can be motivated and budgeted to do public participation? Because there's a tremendous amount of time involved in it. And I think it's also important to have the public participation and actually learn from it, which means that you've actually got to record things to be remembered when there is budget. But I had my camera and microphone off because I just didn't want to show my face. But it's just that basically there needs to be budgeting so that people are motivated to be able to act on any views they hear. Is that useful?
Yeah, that is useful, Ro, and I think that goes beyond this process into some of those kind of wider things that Ricky was talking about as well. So I think it's a useful point. Thank you. Yeah. Can I ask what kind of feedback loops, other than the regular emails, is there anything that encourages you to participate and give us your feedback in?
Nope. Nope.
Anyone else? I mean, this is as Juliet said, it's a 5-year plan, but ideally not necessarily a kind of one and done with the consultation. So what kind of feedback loops could be built into that throughout the process of it, that would allow you to have your say in some of the communities that you're I may have been on mute when I asked that question. So just to repeat again, it's a 5-year process. What kinds of feedback loops can be built into that, so that we continue to hear from some of those people with lived experience and some of the some workers like yourselves throughout the process as the plan's starting to be delivered. Ro and then Ricky again.
I think that the feedback loops are there because you really got open ears. It's actually acting on what the feedback is, because otherwise it's futile for all parties.
Yep, so people need to be seeing things actually starting to happen, to be delivered, in order to be motivated to stay involved. Thanks, Ro. Ricky?
I guess I'm just thinking, yeah, if we do get updates, and if this is over, you see like a 5-year period, maybe like part of that feedback is just so, for example, if I get an email, it's okay to read it, but maybe there's some kind of prompt in there for me to do something, you know, whether that's me to provide further feedback on, you know, what we're doing within the local authority that match some of the themes that we've spoken about. You know, you can be asked for like some real examples of what we've done. I work at Aberdeenshire Council within community engagement, so, you know, could I be asked to provide some real examples of things that we've done within our authority that we meet some of those action points on the action plan. That might, you know, rather than just, it's good to get these emails that I mentioned to give us feedback, maybe, but if there's something within that email that prompts me to do something, you know, I'm not saying, obviously I know people are busy, so it can't be like too much work, but if there's just some kind of small prompts on there for me to provide some kind of feedback, or whether it's just putting something back saying, look, we haven't done anything, even that's feedback, I guess, and our reasons why we haven't done it. So yeah, maybe just like kind of small prompts in those regular emails or updates for us to do something.
Thanks for that. Finlay, are you looking to come in?
Yeah, and it actually really, I think, fits well with the what you were saying there, Ricky, which was that I guess beyond opportunities to provide feedback or hearing about things that are happening, it is just interesting. I mean, a huge part of this is that partnership in delivery, and when we are moving into delivery, what, you know, would be helpful? How do we meaningfully involve people? I mean, is it with people having their day jobs and this being kind of seen as extra? What is uh an offer that is actually quite interesting for people to be part of that work, I guess, rather than being kept up to date on it?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. You know, if there was something, I don't know what, but if there's something out of this that, you know, was really relevant to communities in Aberdeenshire that we could put in place or do something for part of that action plan, you know, and we could see the benefits for. I know this covers so many different areas, but yeah, you're right. If there was something in there, if there was a hook in there that I could take to management and say, look, as part of this, if we could do this, this feeds into the action plan, but it's also got a benefit for communities in Aberdeenshire. So yeah, something like that may work.
Crawford, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you. I came along to this just as a sort of fact-finding mission, really, to try and get to grips with the open government concept. I work with Glasgow Life, which is an alio out of Glasgow City Council, so I'm interested in this and how it aligns with public sector reform. I'd be interested in what scales it's operating at and sort of practical examples. It's just gone through my head that I had a conversation with a colleague in sports just last week who's looking to improve the process of sports centre refurbishment. And actually, maybe this is something that is of interest at that level. But also, I'm not hearing much of a discussion or any discussion within Glasgow Life. But that's not to say that there isn't a discussion or people aren't aware of this within that organisation. It's a fair size of an organisation.
Yeah, I mean, I know that certainly at the phase 1 consultation level, there were civil society organisations, third sector and community organisations from Glasgow certainly participated. Some of them were equalities organisations, but there were wider organisations as well. But I'm not sure, because of the numbers that we've been dealing with, I'm not sure off the top of my head, Crawford, whether anyone from Glasgow City Council or Glasgow Life has participated before. But I mean, scale-wise, this is looking at how Scottish Government is more open and transparent and maintains that trust. However, the conversations and what came out of those phase 1 conversations, people were very much talking about their trust relationship with government at all levels. So that kind of information, I think, is useful to government and actually wider public bodies as well, at all levels too. So if you haven't already got that, we'll make sure we can send a copy of that out to you, and you might find that useful.
Nice.
Laura,
Oh,
sorry, Laura, just got to close the rooms in just about a minute.
Okay.
Sorry. Finlay, will you want to come in on that point?
Yeah, just
Sorry,
to add on that, at local level as well, there's Glasgow City Council is a member of Open Government. So there is that sort of multi-level national and city level in Glasgow at least. So there's just multiple sort of entry points into Open Government there. Ro, I'll let you come.
Just going to say that Scottish Government really needs to enable public bodies to be able to have public participation, because if you're not funded to actually communicate with people at the beginning, the middle and the end of a project, then you're asking for something which is completely unfair.
Thanks for that, Ro. Sorry, I was very busy chatting that down. Thank you for that, and that's maybe a comment to feed in wider beyond the action plan as well. Yeah. Thank you. Does anyone else want to add? I think Sam's closing the rooms. We're about to be dragged back, or everyone else is about to be dragged back into our room.
I think that should be everyone across now.
Thanks. Brilliant, thank you. So bringing everyone back, it'd be great to hear a bit from each of the rooms what discussions were like, and I think, is it Juliet and Dawn are going to be having a bit of discussion about what's come out of the rooms.
I think we'd agreed that SCDC colleagues would feed back very briefly the key themes of what they'd heard. I have the open mic, so I'm going to take the privilege to jump in there first. My room had a fascinating, amazingly quick conversation, but we really felt that we had to go about, that this needed to be about more than just sharing data. There were people in the room that were new to this, but really keen to learn, which is a big theme across all of our conversations. Really looking at the ways that we build trust, and that's about the staff training and capacity as well as for communities. So there's something really important for us to think about there. We had a long chat round about the kind of balance about not just hearing the good stuff, how do we take on board the more challenging conversations and the things that are there? And also to think about how do we actually build a bank of knowledge so that we're not continually asking people in our communities the same questions by different departments, by different people time and time again, really thinking about those good feedback loops, but also about how do we show action, how do we go back and feedback to people what's happening, but how do we keep them involved along the way? So I'm sure I've missed lots of great stuff that came out of my group, and I'm really sorry that is such a brief feedback. We will write this up and share it with you all afterwards. But I'm going to pass on. I can see Laura on my screen. So Laura, I'm going to pass to you next to share the outcome from your room.
10 minutes where we're just starting to get warmed up, I think. But some of the things that came out were that we were lucky enough to have someone who's been involved through the phase 1 and phase 2 and who was talking about the regular communication being important, because we're all very busy. We've all got busy work lives, and that regular communication keeps it live. And saying that that's been really useful through this, but it'll be useful moving forwards, and that can be passive emails and updates on what's happening or why things aren't moving forwards as well, with some explanations, but also perhaps encouraging feedback at various points and action from the people receiving the updates as well. It was raised that, you know, there's a number of different things that people are hearing about: Democracy Matters, the inclusive communication toolkit, you know, and how do those all join up? Which they're potentially joining up behind the scenes, but people are just saying, you know, maybe it being a bit clearer about how those join up would be useful. And the fact that good proper participation needs to be resourced, so that it's not just a one-off, that's an ongoing process that continues to engage with people. And I think the point was that needs to happen, not just that needs to be fed back, not just happen for the Open Government Action Plan, but at all levels of government and public bodies as well. And I'll pass to Francesca.
Perfect. Thanks, Laura. I think some of the stuff that our group was talking about chimes quite similar with both the other groups. We were just getting into the reflection part, and yeah, we could have spoke for another good 15 minutes. But I think the common thing was, for me, listening to what people were saying, is that there is an appetite for collaboration, but there is not necessarily a clear pathway for some of the kind of to find out stuff about what's happening within government and outside. And there's really a space needed for shared learning. And we spoke a little bit at the end about mapping, but it's also about not over mapping as well. So it's difficult to identify pathways where you can align with Scottish Government's programmes. Everybody in the call seemed to have similar experiences when they were talking about trust and transparency. And I'm trying to think what else there was, and I'm feeling miserably to think of anything else. However, I will write it up, and if there's anything that I've missed, Juliet, Laura, Kathleen, Margaret, please let us know now. That's a good sign. And I'll pass to Sam. Did you have a group? That's
That's us.
That does. So I think we're passing over to I'm passing to Juliet to think about sort of coming to the end and conclusions for today, and just wrapping up.
Yeah, thanks, Finlay. So I guess very quickly, thank you again to everyone for coming and for contributing. It's really valuable to hear from new voices. And I think also, as we were saying in our breakout, you know, there's so much work going on that fits the principles of open government, of transparency, accountability, and participation. And it would be really great if we can, you know, we're hopeful that this more sort of flexible and iterative approach means that we can bring in a lot more of that experience as we go through the action plan. So if you are working on things that you think fit inside this sort of open government and the action plan and help deliver on trust and transparency, please get in touch, and we'd love to speak to you more. And we're basically working on having lots of different ways for people to be involved, from, you know, quite intense delivery of specific work to sort of quarterly meetings where we just touch base and make sure that, you know, we're all learning good and effective ways of working from each other. So thank you. It's really, yeah, I'll pass to Dawn.
Yeah, the last couple of minutes, it has been a short but very sweet hour. Thank you all for your participation, engagement, and just that excitement that you bring to the work. You will see there that there are emails from myself, Julia, and Doreen. If you want to stay in touch and have more conversations, please do reach out to us. If there's anything that you feel would be useful for us to take on board as we come towards the end of this phase of the piece of work, then please do reach out to us. There's lots that we'd love to share with you about open government. We wanted to keep this a short session so that we know how busy everyone is, but there are those emails to contact us if you would like anything further. There will be information coming out after the session as well. We will take away those conversations from the breakouts and just write them up into some highline bullet points to share with you all. And yeah, just huge thank you for being part of the conversation today. It's been an absolute privilege and pleasure to hear your points of view and to chat with you very briefly in the breakouts, but it's an ongoing conversation, so please do reach out, stay in touch, and it'd be lovely to hear from you. So thanks for your time today.